Unlike Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon is a story of family ties gone sour and miscommunications that resulted in the loss of an entire dynasty. Even so, shrewd politics, manipulation, and terrible deeds find their place on the show, especially as the Targaryens split into the Green and Black factions. Alicent of House Hightower, and second wife of King Viserys, is considered one of the biggest villains of House of the Dragon for breaking House Targaryen from within. But even greater evil lurks in King's Landing. Larys Strong, brother of Harwin and son of Lionel Strong, known as the Clubfoot because of his childhood disability, entered House of the Dragon in Season 1, Episode 3, second of his name. Confined to non-physical activities, Larys found himself surrounded by whispers and ignored for his disability, which put him in a unique position. He heard a lot about the kingdom and was able to leverage it to his advantage. But Larys also had a streak of violence in him that made him dangerous. These qualities made him the worst character of House of the Dragon. There were plenty of power-hungry characters in Westeros, but even the very worst of them had certain limits that they would not cross. Every religion in the kingdom, from the old gods to the faith of the Seven, condemned killing one's own family, and a kinslayer was considered the very worst of humanity. This person was looked down on and considered cursed, and Larys killed not one, but two of his family members. A casual conversation with Alicent Hightower in the third episode of House of the Dragon had the Queen complaining to Larys about her lack of supporters in the kingdom, and how much she wished her father could return as the king's hand. Larys took this quite literally, and he had the deaths of his father, Lionel, the then Hand, and Harwin Strong arranged so that Alicent could be indebted to him. It was bad enough that he had his only family killed off, but his method of doing it was also horrific beyond words. Larys went to the Red Keep's prisons in Season 1, Episode 6 of HOTD, and gathered a group of prisoners there, promising them their freedom if they could carry out his plans. In a shocking move, Larys cut off the tongues of these prisoners and instructed them to go to Harrenhal and burn it down, while his brother and father were locked in their chambers. This was how Larys was able to fulfill his vile plans, while also ensuring that nobody could speak a word about his involvement in them. Larys Strong entered House of the Dragon as a quiet, observant character, but behind his silence lay a scheming mind that was up to no good. It took a certain level of psychopathy to decimate one's own family in the pursuit of power, and to cut out the tongues of those who did the actual dirty work. Larys was a nobody in King's Landing, but he twisted and manipulated his way into becoming a man of importance in the small council. His relationship with Alicent, in particular, was proof of how low Larys could stoop to gain power. Alicent Hightower was no innocent, but her villainy paled in comparison to Larys Strong. In fact, he was one of the many men who used Alicent as a pawn in their own games, and it started with her offhand comment about desiring more allies in court. After Larys carried out the dreadful murders of Harwin and Lionel, he managed to pin the entire saga on Alicent. He twisted her words and made it sound like she had ordered the kills, which made her culpable in the heinous act. This gave him a measure of control over the Queen, and he kept offering more and more of his services that were supposed to benefit Alicent, but they only made her more indebted to him. He quickly rose through the ranks and became Lord Confessor, eventually showing his true self to Alicent. In Season 1, Episode 9, Larys was seen in Alicent's chambers, wordlessly yet shamelessly demanding sexual favors from her so that he could give her more information about her treacherous handmaids. Audiences might have still had a shred of respect for Larys if he had not turned his relationship with Alicent into a perverted one, but someone as deplorable as Larys could not fathom being a better person. It was easy to feel sorry for Alicent in this situation, because all she wanted was more allies for her cause, as flawed as it may be. Since she had been a young woman, Alicent had been used and abused by men, and Larys did exactly that. Sadly, to keep a hold on Mysaria and Rhaenyra's forces, Alicent had to give in to Larys' perversions regularly. In fact, Larys' whispering and exploiting started very early, and he could be responsible for the entire civil war because of one thing that he said to Alicent. After Daemon and Rhaenyra's encounter at the brothel, Viserys had moon tea sent to his daughter to prevent any pregnancy. Nobody was supposed to know about this, but Larys heard through his network of spies, and he made sure that he delivered this information to Alicent. This wasn't a tidbit that Larys let slip by mistake. It was a calculated dissemination of information that was designed to distance Alicent from Rhaenyra. As girls, Rhaenyra and Alicent shared a strong bond, but Alicent had started growing resentful of the freedoms that the princess was granted, which she couldn't even dream of. It was obvious that Larys picked up on this, and he let slip to Alicent that her friend had consumed moon tea, thus proving that she had lied about being with Daemon. While blaming the entire Targaryen civil war on Larys Strong may not be justified, it is true that he had a large role to play in it. He eroded the camaraderie between Rhaenyra and Alicent and trapped the latter with his deviant ways. Hoarding power and influence were Larys Strong's primary goals, and he was rather good at doing so. He would use a combination of flattery, followed by injecting a healthy dose of paranoia into a person in power, and then a final manipulation to secure their compliance. After he did this with Alicent, Larys then went on to entrap Aegon similarly. However, some viewers thought that Larys showed a different side of himself when he helped Aegon with his injuries after he was burned by dragonfire. But nobody can be sure of what his next move is. Larys felt some kind of empathy for the wasted king who was crippled for life, just like him, and he sought to get him to safety. Aemond was one of the biggest threats to Aegon's life, naturally, but Larys took it upon himself to save Aegon from the worst of his family. However, with Larys' history, it is impossible to take any kindness or benevolence at face value. He could easily turn the king over to Aemond when he felt like it, or even go to Rhaenyra directly, because he had no loyalties. A character like Larys was not accepted by his own people at Harrenhal, who decried him as morally bankrupt and unworthy of trust. He hadn't batted an eyelid in ordering hits on his father and brother, and there were no extenuating circumstances that could excuse him. Larys had no loyalty in him, and he only served himself. After his terrible deeds in Season 1 and much of Season 2, there was very little that could redeem him. Alicent was inarguably his biggest ally, but he was not afraid to throw her under the bus when it came time to elect a regent in place of Aegon. Larys Strong was underestimated by those around him because of his disability, by his own admission, and this was what gave him a considerable advantage over his enemies. He was a man who could go to any deplorable depth to make himself feel bigger and more powerful, and no amount of violence deterred him. He was the most dangerous character in Westeros.